Why was everyone staring at her the moment she stepped aboard? The air inside the USS Vigilance hummed with a sterile, perfect rhythm, like a machine that no longer remembered the scent of sweat, oil, or salt. The corridors gleamed in cold chrome. Every console pulsed with blue light. Screens whispered data in streams too fast for the human eye. And into that glittering sea of perfection walked Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma, the only thing on board that didn't shine. Her uniform was worn soft with time. The knees faded, the elbows pale from decades of pressure against metal bulkheads. Her face carried the faint scars of sunlight and stress, a map of all the storms she'd walked through. But it wasn't the scars that drew the whispers. It was the small, rust-colored name tag pinned over her heart, a piece of stamped metal dulled by years, the letters barely legible. Sharma. They didn't make them like that anymore. Two young sailors watched as she passed, their voices barely above a whisper. Check out the antique. Did she come with the ship or before it? The comments were meant to be quiet, but sound travels differently in polished steel corridors. She heard, she always heard, and she said nothing. Her boots echoed as she entered the logistics hub, a sprawling compartment deep within the ship's armored belly. Screens covered every wall, each one alive with inventory data, glowing symbols, numbers, graphs. Efficiency made visible. Behind a desk stood Lieutenant Commander Thorne, a man so young he still carried the gleam of the academy in his eyes. He didn't stand, didn't salute, just glanced up from his tablet and gestured toward a workstation. Chief Sharma, you're here for the pre-deployment audit. Everything's synced in real time. RFID tags, live manifests, it's all automated. You shouldn't have any trouble keeping up. He smiled the way people do when they've already decided you're outdated. Sharma's nod was crisp. Understood, sir. Her voice was low, gravel-edged, steady as a keel in heavy seas. Thorne tapped his screen again. We run a paperless department here. No need for old habits. Of course, sir. But instead of sitting at the glowing terminal, she crossed the room to a stack of munitions crates, pallets of sealed countermeasure pods. The manifest screen beside them declared, 48 units accounted for. She began to count, physically, hands on cold metal, eyes scanning each seal, each latch, each serial number. Thorne frowned. Chief, the scanner confirmed that pallet this morning. You're wasting time. Scanners see tags, sir. She didn't look up. They don't see cracks, leaks, or bad seals. We have pressure sensors for that. They'd flag an alert. Unless someone spoofed them, she said quietly. Or unless they failed, machines fail, hands don't. Behind her, the two junior sailors snickered again. Thorne's jaw tightened. She was challenging him, not with defiance, but with truth. Before he could reply, a voice cut through the air like a scalpel. Commander, is there a problem here? The ship's captain stood in the hatchway, Captain Eva Rostova, tall, sharp-edged, efficient. She radiated authority the way cold radiates from metal. No issue, Captain, Thorne said quickly. Chief Sharma's just familiarizing herself with our inventory. Good. Rostova's gaze lingered on the chief, on the weathered uniform, the rusted tag. She'd read Sharma's file, long service, mostly logistics, mostly redacted. A name that appeared, vanished, reappeared. Background noise in a clean record. Nothing extraordinary, nothing special. Chief, Rostova said, her tone polite but cool. We trust our systems here. This ship runs on data, not superstition. Aye, Captain, Sharma replied, eyes level, voice calm. Trust but verify. For the briefest second, the captain's expression flickered, a tiny crack in the polished facade. Then she turned and left. When she was gone, Thorne exhaled sharply. You heard the captain. Get on the terminal and do your job the way it's meant to be done in this century. Yes, sir. Sharma returned to the workstation, but she didn't sit. She stood there, posture perfect, eyes moving over the screens as if studying a foreign language. Around her, whispers continued. The relic. The museum piece, the analog anchor. But beneath the surface, something else moved, a quiet current of awareness. She wasn't just watching the numbers. She was listening to the ship itself. That night, when the corridors emptied and the hum of machinery softened into a steady mechanical heartbeat, Chief Sharma began her real work. She walked the decks with no sound but the click of her boots, down through the maintenance passages, past the sealed ammunition holds, past the warm breath of the engine room. She wasn't auditing now, she was learning, mapping the vigilance not by screen but by instinct. She traced hydraulic lines with her fingertips, felt the vibration of power conduits through the metal deck. She memorized the smell of fuel, the pulse of the backup generators, the slight delay in the aft ventilation system. Every small imperfection became a note in her mind's map of the ship. Up on the command deck, Thorne watched her on the internal feed, bent over junction boxes, crawling through narrow maintenance shafts, flashlight in her teeth. He felt irritation flare into anger. When he found her in a Jeffries tube the next morning, she was examining a fiber-optic conduit, the flashlight beam steady as a surgeon's hand. "Chief, this is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're supposed to be auditing ordnance, not crawling around my ship like a bilge rat." Sharma pulled the light from her mouth. "Your ship, sir?" she asked softly. "I thought it belonged to the Navy." "Don't play semantics." She pointed the flashlight at the conduit. "These 3 fiber lines, they all run through the same channel. One hit here, and your bridge loses connection to the aft missile launchers." "That's impossible," he said, defensive. "The design was simulated 1,000,000 times before it was built. Triple redundancy." "Redundancy in code," she replied. "Not in reality. You can't simulate a lucky piece of shrapnel." Thorne's patience snapped. "You're done here, Chief. I'll note it in your report. Obsolete methods, disruptive behavior, stick to your terminal." She didn't argue, didn't even look offended, just nodded once. "Aye, sir." He stormed off, muttering about relics and dead weight. Later in the Combat Information Center, Captain Rastova listened as Thorne vented his frustration. She didn't interrupt, just stared at the tactical plot glowing in front of her, a blue ocean of data and digital certainty. "She's old school, Captain, paranoid, wasting time on manual checks, crawling around like it's 1950. Rastova sighed. "She's here for another week, Commander. Let her finish her process. Then she'll be gone. You'll have your perfect systems back." Thorne nodded, satisfied. But Rastova didn't move for a long moment. Her eyes drifted to the dark window where the sea beyond shimmered under the ship's running lights. "Trust, but verify." The words lingered like a warning. The ocean was calm that night, black glass beneath a sky full of cold stars. Vigilance cut through it like a knife, 20 nautical miles ahead of the main carrier strike group. Picket duty, routine. Inside the CIC, the crew worked in quiet rhythm. Monitors glowed, fingers danced over touch screens, data scrolled like scripture. Then at 2:13 hours, everything changed. There was no explosion, no tremor, just a sound, a thin, high-frequency whine almost beyond hearing. It lasted less than a second. And then, every screen on the ship dissolved into static. The glow vanished. The AI's calm voice broke into a garbled shriek. System-wide data corruption cascade detected. One heartbeat later, the lights died. The ship plunged into darkness, the hum of the electric systems replaced by a low, dreadful silence. Then came the emergency klaxons, red light flashing, alarms blaring, voices shouting. "Report," Rastova's voice sliced through the panic. "Navigation's down, combat systems offline. Comms dead, can't raise the carrier group. Helm unresponsive, no propulsion." Thorne stumbled into the CIC, his tablet useless in his hands. "Logistics is blind, Captain. All systems corrupted." Every officer turned to their black screens, trying to reboot, to restart, to do something. But the ship, once so alive, had become a dead machine floating in hostile water. Restova's knuckles whitened around the edge of her console. "Engineering, report." "Negative control on reactor flow, Captain," came the shaky voice over internal comms. "Digital interfaces are fried. We can't regulate turbines. We're dead in the water." The Vigilance, billion-dollar marvel of technology, was helpless. A digital plague had struck, erasing everything they relied on. And through that chaos, a quiet, steady rhythm of footsteps approached. Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma stepped into the crimson glow of the CIC, tool roll in one hand, an old brass sextant in the other. She looked at no one, didn't ask permission, didn't seek orders. She simply set her tools down on the central console. "Petty Officer," she said calmly to the young sailor at the helm, "there's a manual clutch for the rudder linkage on deck 4, aft steering compartment, large red wheel. Take 2 others and engage it. You'll take steering orders by sound-powered telephone." The sailor blinked, frozen. "Sound-powered." She handed him the old headset from the wall. "It runs on your voice, son. No electricity needed. Move." Her certainty shattered his fear. He ran, 2 others followed. Then she turned to Thorn, whose face was pale under the red light. "The primary power nodes are gone. We'll bypass them. Auxiliary diesel generators. Are they still fueled?" He stammered. Yes, they should be, according to the logs." "The logs are gone, sir," she said evenly. "But I checked them myself 2 days ago. They're full. Get a team to generator room 2. Panel C7 has a manual switchboard. Route auxiliary power directly to comms and lighting." Thorn hesitated. Rastova's voice snapped through the air. "Do it, Commander." He went. Sharma opened her sextant, stepped onto the bridge wing and lifted it to the stars. The night wind caught her hair as she found Polaris, the North Star, steady and unblinking above the chaos. She took her bearings by hand, pencil scratching into a small weathered notebook. When she came back inside, she spoke quietly into the sound-powered phone. "After steering, report." "After steering, manned and ready, Chief," came the reply. "Very good." A moment later, the red emergency lights flickered, steadied, brightened. They weren't blind anymore. Captain Rastova turned toward her. "Chief, how do we hold position?" Sharma looked up, eyes pale gray, calm as the sea outside. "By hand, Captain. The ship may have forgotten how, but we haven't." Outside, the horizon was still dark, a void filled with silence and static. Inside, a woman with a rusty name tag stood at the heart of a crippled warship, rebuilding its soul one manual switch at a time. And no one, not the captain, not the commander, not the sailors who'd laughed at her, had any idea who she really was. Not yet. The lights flickered once, then steadied. White, clean, human light, not the sterile blue of digital panels. It cast hard shadows across the faces on the bridge. The sailors blinked against it, disoriented, as if light itself had forgotten how to exist here. Captain Rastova turned toward the chief. How did you?" "Auxiliary power," Sharma said, her voice calm, almost soft. "Bypass the grid. It's limited, but it'll hold." Rastova stared at her. The ship's AI had gone silent. The consoles still flickered with corrupted code, but the lights were on. That alone was enough to make hardened officers feel like they could breathe again. Then the sound-powered phone crackled. "After steering here, Chief. Rudder link engaged. Manual helm control operational." Sharma pressed the mouthpiece to her lips. "Copy that. Stand by for orders." Thorn reappeared a few minutes later, uniform stained with grease, eyes wide with disbelief. "Auxiliaries live," he said. "You were right, the manual board still works. I never even knew it existed." Sharma didn't reply. She was already tracing something on the bulkhead, an old paper schematic she'd pulled from a locked cabinet. Her calloused finger followed the line of circuits, tapping twice at a junction. "Power here next. Internal comms. Thorne hesitated, then nodded. Aye, Chief. The rank dynamic had shifted. No one said it aloud, but it was there, a subtle gravity that pulled the chaos into order around her. In the dim light, the ship began to breathe again. The next 30 minutes were a blur of movement. Sharma's voice became the metronome of survival, slow, steady, measured. Hold that valve. Route this line manually. Do not engage the breaker until I call it. The crew moved as if waking from paralysis. These were men and women trained for war, but only the digital kind. They were brilliant with code, with touchscreens, with systems that could think faster than they could. But stripped of that, they were adrift. She gave them purpose. At one point, a young ensign looked at her, sweat streaking down his temple. Chief, how do you know all this? These systems were updated decades ago. Sharma didn't look up. Steel is still steel, ensign. Pressure still flows the same way it did 100 years ago. He blinked, then smiled faintly, the first real smile since the blackout. When the low hum of the ventilation system returned, someone on the bridge actually cheered. For a heartbeat, it felt like they were winning. And then the radar came back online. Not the sleek digital Aegis array, that was gone. What flickered to life was a primitive surface scan radar, analog, grainy, resurrected from some forgotten backup circuit. Its faint green sweep cut through static, painting ghostly shapes on a circular screen. Contact, the tactical officer whispered. 3 surface signatures bearing 090, range closing fast. The joy died instantly. Rostova moved beside him. Identification. No IFF signals, Captain. Enemy, she breathed. The bridge fell silent again. Outside, in the dark sea, 3 hostile vessels were moving toward them. They disabled the vigilance with an electronic warfare strike, and now they were coming to finish it. Thorne's voice trembled. Captain, we can't engage. Weapons control is still down. Fire control. I know, Rostova said sharply. Sharma stepped closer, her boots slow and deliberate. How long until they're in range? Minutes, said the tactical officer. Then we have time. Her tone was not hopeful, it was factual. She turned to Thorne. The ECM pods in Cargo Bay 4, are they intact? He hesitated. They should be, but they can't function without the main combat network. They can, if you know how to wake them up by hand. Rostova looked at her sharply. You can do that. Yes, Captain, I can. Without waiting for permission, Sharma grabbed her canvas tool roll and started for the hatch. Ensign Vale with me. Bring 2 strong arms. The young officer hesitated for half a second before following. Down in the cargo bay, the air was cold and damp. The red emergency lights pulsed like a heartbeat. Between towering stacks of crates, Sharma found the pallet she'd checked days ago, the same one she'd insisted on inspecting by hand. 48 pods, every seal intact. Help me get 2 loose, she ordered. The sailors heaved them free, heavy metal cylinders, about waist high, each with a recessed control panel and a warning stencil. Electronic countermeasure device, integration required. Integration my ass, she muttered. She knelt beside the first, unzipping her tool roll. Wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, all old tools, polished from decades of use. She removed a small access panel and began flipping miniature dip switches buried inside. The ensign leaned over her shoulder. How do you even know this? Because I helped field test their prototype, she said flatly, back when most of you were still in school. The sailor swallowed hard and didn't ask again. When the last switch clicked, she reattached the cover. All right, manual activation. We carry one to the bridge wing, the other stays here as backup. They hoisted the pod, muscles straining, and carried it up the ladder wells, through dim corridors that smelled of ozone and metal. By the time they reached the bridge, the tension had become unbearable. 2 missiles inbound, the tactical officer shouted. Range 7 miles and closing. Rastova froze. Thorne's fingers clenched uselessly around a dead console. No CIWS. No Aegis system. No automated defense. There was nothing left to save them, except a woman with a rusty name tag. Sharma dropped the pod to the deck with a heavy clang. She crouched, popped open a side panel and began calibrating it manually, twisting knobs that hadn't been touched in years. Thorne stepped forward, panic bleeding into his voice. Chief, even if you power that thing, the targeting. There's no targeting, she said. It's noise. All we need is confusion. She turned to the portside bridge door, her movements precise. Help me carry it outside. The sailors obeyed, without hesitation now. Cold wind rushed in as they stepped onto the bridge wing. The sea below was ink black. Far on the horizon, faint streaks of light, the approaching missiles. Sharma crouched beside the pod, flipped a small brass cover to reveal a red switch. Her fingers brushed over it once, steady, certain. Now, she whispered. She slammed the switch down. The pod roared to life, emitting a shriek of electronic static so powerful it felt like pressure in the bones. A blinding multicolored flare erupted from the ship's side, infrared, ultraviolet, radar, a storm of electromagnetic chaos. Out in the darkness, the missiles shuddered in their trajectories. Their seekers blinked blind, their guidance scrambled. One detonated harmlessly a mile away, lighting the waves with brief white fire. The other streaked past the Vigilance's stern, missing by meters, the heat of its exhaust washing over the bridge like the breath of hell. The crew ducked, then silence. When they lifted their heads, the sky was dark again. They were alive. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The only sound was the hiss of wind through the open bridge wing. Then Thorne's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. How did you know that would work? I didn't, Sharma said quietly, but I knew it might. The answer landed like a stone in the still water of the room. Rastova exhaled, slow and shaky. Her eyes met Sharma's. You just saved this ship, Chief. Sharma gave a small nod. We're not safe yet, Captain. They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more. The captain turned toward the radar officer. Range on enemy vessels. 5 miles holding position, came the reply. Looks like they're regrouping. Rastova straightened. Then let's not wait for them. She looked at Sharma again. Can we move? Slowly, engineering, bringing up steam pressure by hand. We'll have propulsion soon. The captain's jaw tightened. Then we fight to live long enough for help to find us. But even as she said it, a new sound crackled through the static-filled comms, faint, distant, full of noise. Vigilance, this is Strike Group 5, do you copy? The bridge froze. The communications officer lunged for the analog handset Sharma had reconnected earlier. Strike Group 5, this is Vigilance, we read you. The reply came through clearer this time. We see your signal. Admiral Tanaka is en route to your position by helicopter. Sit tight, we're coming. Relief surged through the room, raw and unfiltered. But for Rastova, the feeling was short-lived. An admiral here, in person. She looked around at the chaotic bridge, jury-rigged wires, dark screens, smoke-streaked faces. Her heart sank. He's going to see this disaster and end my career. Thorne caught her expression and said quietly, at least we're still here for him to yell at. Rastova almost smiled, almost. Then her gaze drifted to Sharma. The old chief was coiling cables, cleaning her tools, preparing for the next problem before anyone else had even caught their breath. Chief, the captain said. Sharma paused. Ma'am. Who taught you to do all this? The faintest flicker crossed Sharma's face. Experience, she said simply. And for the first time, Rastova realized she was looking at someone who'd already survived a war before this one ever started. 15 minutes later, the deep thrum of rotor blades rolled over the ship. A helicopter approached, its searchlights sweeping across the dark waves. The crew gathered on the deck, battered, exhausted, half in disbelief. The Admiral was coming. Sharma stood a little apart from the rest, still composed, eyes on the horizon. Her uniform was streaked with oil. Her name tag, dull and rusted, caught the dawn's first faint glint. And though no one said it aloud, every sailor who saw her that night would remember that rust forever, not as decay, but as proof. Proof that she had weathered time, storms, and scorn, and never once cracked. They still didn't know who she really was. But they were about to find out. The helicopter's rotors hammered the night, sending ripples across the Black Sea. Spray hit the deck in silver arcs as the Seahawk hovered over the Vigilance's fantail. Captain Eva Rostova stood waiting, her posture rigid, her stomach in knots. Around her, the crew formed a tense line, exhausted faces, uniforms streaked with grease, adrenaline barely masking fear. The ship still limped. The air smelled of ozone and burnt circuits, but it was alive. The Admiral's boots touched the deck with a metallic thud. Admiral Kaido Tanaka, commander of the Fifth Fleet, compact, precise, eyes sharp enough to cut steel. His mere presence seemed to quiet the chaos. He didn't salute, he didn't smile. He simply looked around, taking in the broken lights, the dead panels, the smell of failure. "Captain," he said, his tone carried weight like gravity. "Report." Rostova swallowed hard. "Admiral, at 2:13 we experienced total systems failure, full network corruption, electronic warfare strike, likely from hostile vessels. We—" Tanaka cut her off with a raised hand. "I have the preliminary feed from the carrier. What I want to know," he said, stepping closer, "is why my billion-dollar destroyer isn't at the bottom of the sea." The words were sharp, but his eyes, dark and calculating, searched her face, looking for answers she didn't have. Rostova hesitated. "We had help, sir." She glanced sideways at Commander Thorne, an unconventional response. Tanaka's brow furrowed. "Show me." He strode past them, his aides hurrying to keep up. The sound of his boots against the steel deck echoed like a drumbeat. Inside the CIC, the Admiral stopped. The room was half-lit by jury-rigged lamps. Cables snaked across the deck. Most screens still flickered with static or hung frozen on corrupted code. The only steady light came from a single analog radar, its slow, rhythmic sweep cutting through the chaos like a heartbeat. And at the center of it all stood Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma. Her back was to him. One hand held a sound-powered telephone. Her voice was low, calm, unshaken. "After steering, adjust course to 350. Let's keep our narrowest profile to the east." Tanaka's step slowed. The bridge crew parted before him, a wave of silence following his presence. He moved until he stood directly behind the chief. From here, he could see the frayed fabric of her uniform, the streak of oil across one shoulder, and the small, dull piece of metal pinned over her heart. He leaned slightly forward to read it. Sharma. The name hit him like a physical blow. He froze, his breath caught. The hard lines of his face softened, disbelief flickering, then something deeper, older. He whispered it once under his breath, "Sharma." Then louder, "Sharma." The chief turned, slowly, calmly. The headset still hung around her neck. Her pale gray eyes met his, steady, unreadable. "Admiral," she said simply. The room was still. Even the hum of the auxiliary generators seemed to fade. Tanaka straightened, spine rigid, every inch of him snapping into ceremonial precision. Then, without hesitation, he raised his right hand to his brow. The salute was sharp, perfect, absolute. The kind of salute given not to rank but to reverence. The bridge gasped. The most powerful man in the fleet, saluting a logistics chief with a rusty name tag. Sharma returned it, not with pride, not with surprise, but with quiet acknowledgement. Her motion was crisp, measured, filled with the weight of years. Tanaka held the salute for a moment longer, then lowered his hand. His voice, when he spoke, was softer, rougher. "I'll be damned," he said. "Keystone." A ripple went through the room. Captain Rostova blinked. "Sir, what did you say?" Tanaka didn't answer her. He was still looking at Sharma, as if seeing a ghost he'd long stopped believing was real. Sharma's lips moved just slightly. "It's been a long time, Admiral." "Too long," he said. His voice carried something between awe and grief. Rostova looked from one to the other, completely lost. "Admiral, forgive me, but who is she?" Tanaka turned slowly toward his officers, his expression hard again, but the hardness wasn't anger. It was reverence forged in memory. "You people have no idea who this is, do you?" His voice was low, deliberate. "You see an old uniform, you see a rusty tag, you see a name you don't recognize, but I see the woman who saved my entire team 20 years ago." The room didn't move. Tanaka's gaze drifted past them, to a point far beyond the bridge, beyond this ship, this ocean, this night. His voice lowered, taking on that distant cadence of memory. "We were behind enemy lines, Operation Cinderfall, a disaster from the start. Comms jammed, evac compromised, battalion closing in. We were ghosts waiting to die." He took a slow breath, his tone darkening. "We had one contingency. One. A support operative buried deep within the logistics core, someone with access to systems nobody else could touch. We didn't even know her name, just her call sign, Keystone." He looked back at Sharma. "You." Thorne swallowed hard, every mocking word he'd ever said now a blade twisting in his gut. Tanaka continued, his words steady, reverent. "While the admirals argued about extraction plans, Keystone was already at work. She rerouted a stealth drone through a backdoor code she wrote herself, guided us foot by foot through enemy patrols using shortwave bursts on a radio she built from scrap, navigated us through a minefield using nothing but a tourist map and the stars." He paused, jaw tight. "When our bird went down, she coordinated local fishermen to pull us from the water before the enemy even realized we were gone. She did it all without orders, without recognition, without the luxury of failure." The bridge was silent, except for the faint hum of the restored lights. Tanaka's eyes hardened. "I never met her, only heard her voice, but I never forgot it. When they told me Keystone retired, I believed it. I thought she'd vanished into history." He looked at her again. "And yet here you are, still serving, still saving ships." The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't confusion or fear, it was awe. Thorne felt heat rise in his face, shame crawling up his spine. He remembered the smirks, the dismissive tone, the word relic. He looked down, unable to meet her eyes. Captain Rostova, always composed, always unshakable, found herself speechless. She stared at Sharma as if seeing her for the first time. You're that Keystone." Sharma's expression didn't change. "I was," she said quietly, "a long time ago." Tanaka shook his head slowly. "No, you still are." For the next few minutes, the Admiral moved through the CIC, inspecting the chaos. His aides followed, recording damage reports, system readouts, tactical data. But every few steps he glanced back at Sharma, as if to confirm she was still real. He finally turned to Rostova. "Your systems are compromised. Full digital restoration will take days. Until then, you'll operate under manual control." "Yes, sir," Rostova said. He looked to Sharma. "Chief, you'll oversee damage control and system recovery." Rostova blinked, startled. "Sir, that's—" "An order," Tanaka finished, his tone leaving no room for debate. Rostova hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, Admiral." Tanaka stepped closer to Sharma, his voice lowering. "You've spent a career in the shadows, Chief, always behind the curtain, always holding the line while others got the medals. I won't forget this. Not again." Sharma met his gaze, her own steady and unyielding. "I didn't do it for medals, sir." "I know," he said softly. He studied her one last time, then turned toward the captain. Coordinate with the fleet. Get me full situational awareness. I'll be in my quarters drafting the report. Restova saluted. Aye, Admiral. But before Tanaka left the bridge, he paused by the door, looked back once more at the chief. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried through the room. You see that rust on her name tag, he said. That's not neglect, that's service. Every flake of it is a year someone else got to live because she didn't stop working. And then he was gone. For a long while no one moved. The bridge crew stood in reverent silence, surrounded by the low hum of restored power. Thorn approached slowly, the weight of his own arrogance pressing down like armor. He stopped a few feet from her. Chief, I. Sharma didn't let him finish. She gestured toward a nearby console. Manual override for the fire suppression in Cargo Bay 3 is sticking. I suggest you check it personally, Commander. Hands, not screens. He nodded, his throat tight. Aye, Chief. It wasn't a rebuke, it was forgiveness and a lesson. As he left, the young sailors who'd once mocked her stepped aside in silence. Their eyes followed her with something close to reverence. Captain Restova lingered near the forward viewport, the horizon beginning to glow faintly with the coming dawn. She spoke softly, almost to herself. All this time you were here on my ship, and I never knew. Sharma's reply was barely above a whisper. You weren't supposed to. Restova turned to her. Why? Why stay in the shadows after all you've done? The chief's eyes were distant, pale gray against the dim light. Because shadows are where you see the light most clearly. Restova didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Outside, the first edge of sunlight broke over the sea. The Vigilance, battered, scorched, and scarred, caught the light on its hull. It wasn't the ship that had survived the night. It was the people. And at the center of it stood a woman whose name was almost lost to rust. A name that, once spoken, made an Admiral salute. The hum of the rotors faded into the distance. The Admiral's helicopter was gone. The sound left behind a strange, aching quiet, the kind that only comes after survival. The crew stood motionless on the bridge, staring at the empty doorway he had disappeared through. No one spoke. The air still smelled of ozone and oil. Every surface gleamed with sweat and soot. And amid it all stood Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma, small, calm, steady, the last still point in a ship that had nearly lost its soul. Captain Restova exhaled slowly, her eyes still on the deck. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but certain. Chief, she said, damage control and system recovery are yours. Command as you see fit. The words struck like thunder, not in volume but in meaning. Restova had just surrendered authority, willingly, to the woman the crew had once mocked. Sharma nodded, not out of pride but acknowledgement. Aye, Captain. It was not victory, it was duty. Thorn, still streaked with grease, lingered near the aft station. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to say anything, but she stopped him with a look. Manual override for fire suppression in Cargo Bay 3, she said evenly. You'll check it yourself. Hands, not screens. Thorn hesitated, then he nodded once. Aye, Chief. His voice was hoarse, humbled, right away. He turned and left, carrying her lesson like a weight he would never put down. Restova watched him go. When she looked back at Sharma, something in her had changed, less command, more respect. Whatever you need, Chief, she said softly. Sharma gave a small nod. We'll bring her back, Captain, one system at a time. Down below, the Vigilance was a labyrinth of flickering lights and echoes. The corridors glowed faintly red, patches of smoke still curling from burnt panels. The ship felt wounded, alive but hurting. Sharma moved through it with silent purpose. Everywhere she went, the noise stilled. Sailors paused what they were doing just to watch her work. There was something unspoken about her presence, a calm that carried authority without ever needing to declare it. In the generator room, Sparks flew as teams labored to stabilize the backup circuits. Sharma stepped between them, her voice firm but never raised. Lock the feed valve before you reconnect. The surge will cook you if you don't. The petty officer obeyed immediately, as though her tone carried gravity itself. Pressure reading. 60%, Chief. Hold it there, stabilize before the next link. Minutes stretched into hours. The crew worked through fatigue, through sweat and trembling hands. They no longer asked why when she gave an order, they just trusted. Trust had become their new technology. On the bridge, Captain Restova watched the gradual transformation. The lights brightened to a steady white. The low rumble of the engines deepened as steam pressure climbed. Somewhere below, the ventilation system sighed back to life, pushing fresh air through steel lungs. Everywhere she looked, the chaos was being replaced by quiet human order. Commander Thorne reappeared, dirty, exhausted but different. His posture was less rigid now, less certain, as if the weight of his own arrogance had been burned off in the fire. "Cargo Bay 3 secure," he reported. "Manual system works, you were right." Restova gave a faint smile. "I'd say we're both learning new things tonight." He nodded, glancing toward the chief's workstation. "Captain, I don't think I've ever seen leadership like that." Restova followed his gaze. Sharma stood near the forward console, one hand on the rail, her face illuminated by the faint glow of analog instruments. She wasn't barking orders, wasn't commanding through volume, just presence. "Neither have I," Restova murmured. Hours passed. The ship settled into a rhythm again, slow, methodical, alive. From the outside, the Vigilance still looked scarred. Blackened streaks across the hull, antenna arrays twisted, comms modules fried. But from within, you could feel it, the pulse had returned. Sharma walked the length of the main corridor, clipboard in hand. The air smelled faintly of burnt insulation and coffee. The young sailors she passed now moved aside with quiet respect. Some nodded, some saluted, none dared to speak first. When she stopped by the engineering hatch, Master Chief Franklin looked up from his tools. "We're holding steady, Chief, turbines responding smooth. She's still got fight left." "She always did," Sharma said. "Just needed to remember how to breathe without machines telling her when." Franklin chuckled softly. "Guess that goes for all of us." Sharma gave him a look, something like a faint smile, before moving on. In the corridor, she paused by a small brass porthole. Dawn was breaking, pale gold spilling across the waves. The light reflected off the sea, off the hull, off the quiet strength of everything that had survived. Her reflection in the glass looked tired. The gray in her hair was visible now. The faint scars at the corner of her mouth. The name tag, rusted, dull, caught the sunlight for just a moment and glowed like copper fire. She looked at it, then at the horizon. "Still here," she whispered. Up on the bridge, Captain Restova leaned on the console, watching her crew with something like pride. They were tired, filthy, running on adrenaline and bad coffee, but they were alive. Thorne approached her, rubbing his eyes. "Never thought I'd say this, Captain, but the analog systems might just keep us alive longer than the billion-dollar AI did." Restova gave a dry chuckle. "Sometimes the most advanced thing you can trust is a human being." He nodded, "especially one with a rusty name tag." The captain didn't reply. She didn't have to. By midday, the sea had calmed. The Vigilance moved under her own power again, slow, deliberate, each turn of the propeller a heartbeat. The fleet had taken position nearby, silent guardians in the distance. Sharma sat in the auxiliary control room, her tool roll open beside her. She was alone, for the first time since the crisis began. The low hum of the ship filled the space, steady, constant, comforting. Her hands moved automatically, checking pressure gauges, tracing circuits, tightening fittings. Not because anyone asked her to, but because that's what she did. Because ships, like people, needed to be reminded they were cared for. The door opened quietly. Captain Rostova entered, carrying 2 metal mugs. The smell of strong coffee filled the air. "Thought you could use this," she said. Sharma looked up surprised. "Thank you, ma'am." Rostova handed her the mug, then leaned against the bulkhead. "You ever going to tell me why your entire service record is half classified?" Sharma took a sip, eyes on the floor. "No, ma'am." Rostova smiled faintly. "Didn't think so." For a while they stood in silence, just the hum of the engines and the gentle rhythm of the sea. Finally the captain spoke again. "When I took command of this ship, I thought leadership meant control, efficiency, systems that never failed." Sharma glanced at her. "And now?" Rostova exhaled. "Now I think maybe it means knowing when to let someone else steer." Sharma nodded slightly. "Good lesson, hard one too." Rostova tilted her head. "You've been through worse, haven't you?" "Different kinds," Sharma said quietly. "But the fear feels the same. It always does." There was something in her voice, not pride, not regret, but acceptance. The sound of someone who had seen enough to understand that fear never truly leaves, only becomes familiar. Later that evening, the ship's log recorded the words, "USS Vigilance operational, crew stable, systems under manual control, morale high." No one mentioned the name responsible for that line, but everyone knew. In the mess hall, sailors spoke in hushed tones, passing coffee down the line. The jokes were gone, replaced by something quieter, reverence. One of the young petty officers who'd mocked her earlier now kept glancing at the doorway, hoping she'd walk in. Not to apologize, he'd already done that, but just to see her again. To remind himself that calm can look like courage, and rust can shine brighter than gold. But she didn't come to the mess. She never did. She stayed in the machine shop, sitting at a small workbench under a single overhead light. Before her lay the same canvas tool roll, unspooled, familiar. She cleaned each piece with slow precision, wiping away the grime, the sweat, the heat of the night before. When she reached her sextant, she paused. The brass was scuffed, but it gleamed where her fingers touched. The instrument that had found their place in a blind sea still carried the faint scent of salt. And beside it lay her name tag. She held it in her hand for a long time. She didn't polish it, didn't try to erase the rust. Her thumb traced over the letters SHARMA, feeling the texture of every year embedded in that metal. That rust wasn't weakness. It was history, proof that time had tried and failed to erase her. She pinned it back over her heart. Up on the bridge, Captain Rostova looked out across the darkening sea. The sky had turned a deep violet, the last light bleeding into the horizon. Behind her, Thorne spoke softly. "Do you think she'll ever let anyone thank her?" Rostova shook her head. "She doesn't need thanks." Thorne frowned. "Then what does she need?" The captain turned toward the open door, where faint footsteps echoed down the corridor, calm, even purposeful. "She needs the ship to keep moving," Rostova said. "That's all." Outside, the sea stretched endless and silent. The Vigilance pushed forward through it, not perfect, not flawless, but alive. And somewhere below, a woman with gray eyes and a rusted name tag made sure of it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The sea had settled into silence. It was the third night since the attack. The Vigilance cruised slowly under its own power, engines thrumming like a heart rediscovering its rhythm. Systems were still mostly manual, screens still dark, but the crew had adjusted, hands on valves, eyes on gauges, voices over sound-powered lines. It wasn't the Navy they were trained for, but it was the Navy they'd found. In the dark of the ship's machine shop, a single lamp burned. Anna Sharma sat alone at the bench, sleeves rolled up, oil streaked across her hands. In front of her lay a small notebook, edges frayed, pages yellowed with time. The handwriting inside was neat, measured, and old. Coordinates, frequencies, notes written in shorthand that only she could read. Between the lines were dates, places, some underlined, some circled. At the bottom of one page, a name, Cinderfall. She hadn't opened this notebook in years. Her fingers traced the ink, faded from salt and sweat, and for a moment the hum of the present dissolved into the static of memory. The air had been hotter then. A desert war zone, nameless, endless. The kind where the sun peeled paint from steel and dust got into your teeth no matter how tight you sealed your mask. She was younger, not by much, but enough to still believe things could be fixed if you worked hard enough. She'd been assigned to Logistics Command for a classified operation codenamed Cinderfall, supposedly a support role, a safe one. Boxes, codes, fuel, supply lines. She knew better even then. In war, there's no such thing as safe. When it all went wrong, she was the only one left with a working transmitter. The strike team, Tanaka's team, was trapped beyond the canyon ridge. Enemy reinforcements were converging fast. The official rescue plan was taking too long. She begged for authorization to act. None came. So she acted anyway. She rerouted power from the base grid, used a broken drone's transceiver to piggyback on a civilian frequency. The signal was weak, but it reached them. She remembered the voice on the other end. Calm, strained, young. "Who is this? We've got no comms." She didn't answer the question. "Keep moving north. There's a stream bed ahead. Use it for cover, 200 meters, then veer west. You'll find a ridge. Stay below the skyline." There was a pause, then "Copy that." That was the first time she'd guided someone through hell, using nothing but static and instinct. For 3 days, she kept them alive, shifting supply drops, jamming patrol frequencies, leading them through terrain she'd only seen on a map. She hadn't eaten, barely slept. The power grid nearly blew twice. The base commander ordered her to stand down. She ignored it. By the time Tanaka's men made it to the extraction point, her equipment was sparking, and her hands were bleeding from rewiring circuits barehanded. And when the chopper lifted off, carrying them out of the valley, she sat in the dirt outside the comms tent, radio silent, eyes closed. No one ever said thank you. The mission stayed buried. The record sealed. She didn't expect more. She didn't deserve more. But she remembered the voice on the other end of the static. Calm, steady, alive. She'd kept that voice alive. And sometimes that was enough. A sound pulled her back to the present, a light knock at the doorframe. "Jiva." It was Ensign Vale, the young officer who'd helped her carry the ECM pod days ago. He looked hesitant, standing just inside the doorway. She gestured to the stool across from her. "You're up late, Ensign." He nodded. "Couldn't sleep. Engine noise is too human now." That made her smile. "You'll get used to it." He glanced at the open notebook, at the looping coordinates in strange shorthand. "Is that from before?" Her eyes followed his. "Yes." Vale hesitated. "The Admiral, he called you Keystone. What does that mean?" Sharma closed the notebook gently, the sound soft but final. "It means I was the piece no one saw, but everything depended on." Vale thought for a moment, then said quietly, "That sounds lonely." "It was," she said. The silence after that was comfortable, heavy, but not awkward. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Why'd you never tell anyone? You could've." "Worn medals," she interrupted softly. "Had a better post, been paraded as proof of something." She shook her head. "Medals fade, Ensign, metal tarnishes. Rust tells the truth. It means you lasted." He looked at her rusted tag, the one pinned neatly over her heart, and understood what she meant. "You know," he said, smiling faintly, "the crew talks about you like you're some kind of legend now." Sharma raised an eyebrow. "Legends are for ghosts, Ensign. I'm still here." He laughed under his breath. "Yeah, but I think that's what makes it work." When he left, Sharma stayed in the quiet. Her reflection in the dark porthole looked back at her, older now, tired but grounded. She thought of Tanaka, of the way he'd saluted her without hesitation. It had been decades since anyone had done that. And for the first time in years, she'd felt something shift inside her, something like grief, but gentler. Recognition is a double-edged thing. It reminds you of what you gave and what you lost. Her mind drifted again, not to the mission but to the aftermath. There had been others once, a small team, quiet specialists, the kind that never existed on paper. She could still see their faces in her mind, laughing in the dark, sharing instant coffee over cracked radios. None of them made it to retirement. Every one of them had given something away: time, sleep, sanity, lives. She'd given anonymity. It was easier that way. No expectations, no glory, just work, the kind of work that saved lives without anyone noticing. That was enough. It had always been enough. Up on the bridge, the ship sailed through a sea of moonlight. The water reflected silver against the hull. Inside, the crew moved with a new kind of confidence, quieter, more deliberate. The laughter that echoed now was soft, tired, genuine. Captain Rostova stood by the helm, arms crossed, watching the radar sweep. The analog display glowed faintly green, steady, human. Thorne approached from behind, holding a small datapad, one of the few systems now partially restored. "Fleet wants our full systems report by morning," he said. Rostova didn't look away from the glass. "We'll send it, but let's leave out one detail." Thorne frowned. "Which one?" "The part where a woman with a rusted name tag saved the most advanced ship in the fleet by herself." He smiled faintly. "Wouldn't that make for good morale?" She shook her head. "No, it would make for a good story. She doesn't want stories." Thorne followed her gaze out to sea. "Then what does she want?" Rostova's voice was quiet: "To keep the ship moving." They stood there for a while, saying nothing. The ocean stretched endless before them, the stars steady overhead. Down below, Sharma closed her notebook and slipped it back into her pack. She thought about burning it once years ago, but couldn't. You don't burn your ghosts. You carry them until they weigh less. She reached for her coffee, now cold, and took a sip anyway. The ship rocked gently underfoot. The sound of engines rolled through the floor like a slow heartbeat. That rhythm, she'd learned to love it. The mechanical pulse of something alive, something still fighting. Her gaze fell again on the name tag, the same one people had laughed at, the same one an admiral had saluted. There was irony in that, but also truth. Rust isn't decay, it's memory, the mark left when time refuses to let you disappear. She picked up her sextant one more time, aligning it toward the porthole where the moonlight spilled in. The brass gleamed faintly in the silver glow. "Still steady," she murmured. A voice called from the hallway, one of the night crew. "Chief, we're ready for the next systems test." She stood, slid the sextant back into its case, and straightened her uniform. "On my way." Her voice was steady, the same calm tone it had always been, but behind it now was something else. "Peace." As she walked down the corridor, the younger sailors she passed nodded respectfully. She nodded back, her expression unreadable but warm. The world had changed around her. The Navy had changed. The technology, the pace, the language, all different. But the ocean hadn't changed. Neither had duty. And as long as ships floated and storms raged, there would always be someone like her, unseen, uncelebrated, holding the line while the world looked elsewhere. The quiet ones, the ones who saved everything without needing to be seen. The ones who carried rust like a medal. Later, as dawn broke again over the Pacific, Captain Rostova made the final entry in the log. "Crisis resolved. System stable. Crew exceptional. Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma to remain on assignment at my request." She paused, then added a single line more. "Some names don't need rank. They carry their own weight." Below decks, Sharma returned to her duties. Her fingers brushed the tag over her heart once, a small, silent ritual, then went back to work. The ship moved forward, cutting through the calm sea with slow, unwavering strength. No fanfare, no music, just the sound of resilience. And in that quiet hum, that heartbeat of steel and salt, her story continued. Because legends don't live in headlines. They live in people who never stopped showing up. By the time land appeared on the horizon, the crew had been awake for almost 20 hours. The USS Vigilance moved at half speed, her hull scarred and blackened, her systems still mostly offline. But the ship was alive, carried not by code or AI, but by hands and hearts. As dawn broke over the sea, the faint outline of the harbor came into view. The sunlight spilled across the waves, painting the battered destroyer gold. The crew gathered quietly along the deck rails. Some leaned, some stood at attention, all staring at the coastline with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. They had survived, and word had already traveled faster than the ship itself. On shore, a line of press vans and naval personnel waited on the pier. Drones hovered overhead, cameras trained on the ship as it approached. It had been decades since a vessel of that class had lost full electronic capability, and decades since one had survived under such conditions. Headlines had already begun to circulate. Miracle on the Cerulean Strait. AI shutdown, manual minds prevail. Rust and blood save the fleet. Captain Eva Restova stood at the bridge window, jaw tight, eyes scanning the gathering crowd. They're going to swarm us the moment we dock. Commander Thorne stood beside her. They're saying we survived because of a systems miracle. Restova's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. No, we survived because of a human miracle. Thorne looked at her. You going to tell them that? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted down to the lower deck, where a small figure was checking mooring lines, clipboard in hand. Anna Sharma. Even now she worked like the rest, no difference, no ceremony. Just methodical, quiet precision. Restova sighed. She won't want the attention, and honestly, I don't blame her. The ship eased into the harbor with the slow grace of a wounded animal returning to land. Tugboats flanked her sides, water shimmering around their wakes. As the gangway dropped, cameras began flashing. Voices rose. Captain Restova, is it true your ship was completely blind? Commander, how did you restore control? Who authorized the manual systems? Restova walked down first, posture straight, uniform pressed despite the exhaustion. She answered the questions with steady precision, technical, measured, careful. But when someone shouted, "Who was responsible for the recovery?" she hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the deck behind her. Chief Sharma was standing near the railing, clipboard tucked under her arm, eyes focused on a group of sailors securing the ship's lines. The light caught the rust on her tag, turning it almost amber. Restova turned back to the cameras. My crew, she said simply, every last one of them. It was the truth, just not all of it. When the reporters were gone and the dock began to clear, a small group remained, the Admiral's staff, a few senior officers, and Admiral Tanaka himself. He'd been waiting. The Admiral approached the gangway as the crew stood at attention. His steps were slow, deliberate, his face unreadable. Restova saluted, "Sir." "At ease, Captain." His voice was calm, quieter than usual. "You brought her home, well done." Restova nodded, then glanced at the chief still lingering at the edge of the deck. "Not alone, sir." Tanaka followed her gaze. For a moment his eyes softened, then he walked toward her. The chatter on the dock died instantly. Sailors stopped moving. Sharma noticed him only when he was a few steps away. She straightened automatically, expression neutral, clipboard still in hand. "Admiral," she said. "Chief." They regarded each other for a long moment, the ocean wind tugging at their uniforms. "You never were one for ceremony," Tanaka said quietly. "I work better without an audience, sir." He smiled faintly. You always did. Behind them, Captain Rastova waited, unsure whether to step in or step back. The Admiral's tone wasn't the tone of command anymore. It was something closer to reverence. I've spoken to the fleet board, Tanaka said. They're aware of what happened out there. You'll be receiving official commendation. Sharma's brow furrowed slightly. That's unnecessary, sir. It's deserved. Sir, with respect, I've had my share of medals. They don't keep ships afloat. Tanaka studied her. Then what does? She looked past him at the ship, at the crew still coiling ropes and wiping sweat from their faces. Them, she said simply, and time. The Admiral's jaw tightened. You could retire now, you know. After this, you could have your own command if you wanted it. You've earned that right. Sharma shook her head. I don't want command, sir. I want purpose. Command fades, purpose doesn't. He nodded slowly, understanding, though there was a flicker of sadness in his eyes. Still the same keystone, he said softly. Always the one holding things together while the rest of us take the credit. Sharma gave a faint smile, a tired one but genuine. Credit keeps the politicians happy, sir. I'll settle for function. Tanaka almost laughed, but there was something like sorrow behind it. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Take care of them, Chief, he said. The Navy needs people like you more than it realizes. She met his gaze. No, sir. The Navy needs to remember why people like me exist in the first place. And with that, she released his hand. The Admiral stood for a moment longer, watching her, a woman who had once saved him and now refused to let him repay the debt. Then he turned and walked away, the sound of his boots echoing across the dock until it faded into the sea breeze. That night the ship was quiet. Most of the crew had been granted liberty, a few hours of rest, a few hours on land. But Sharma stayed aboard. She walked the decks in the moonlight, the ship's hull creaking softly as it settled against the dock. The silence felt heavier here, almost sacred. She stopped by the rail, hands resting on cold metal, eyes tracing the reflection of the moon across the black water. The city lights shimmered in the distance. The sea smelled different here, industrial, safe. It didn't feel right. She preferred the open water, the hum of danger beneath her feet. Footsteps approached from behind. Chief, said Captain Rastova's voice. Sharma turned slightly. Ma'am. The captain leaned beside her against the rail, both women staring out toward the horizon. The sound of faint waves filled the space between them. I heard the board giving you a medal, Rastova said. Sharma's expression didn't change. They can keep it. Rastova smiled softly. That's what I told them you'd say. They stood in silence for a while longer before the captain spoke again, quieter this time. You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were a relic, a problem I had to manage. I know. I was wrong. Sharma turned her head. You learned. Rastova nodded. You taught me. Then it wasn't wasted. The captain studied her for a moment. You ever think about why you stay enlisted? You could have been an officer decades ago. Sharma looked back at the dark water. Officers lead from the bridge. Chiefs lead from the deck. You can't feel a ship through a touchscreen, Captain. Rastova smiled faintly. No, I suppose you can't. She hesitated, then added, if I ever have a daughter, I hope she has your kind of strength. Sharma's gaze softened, but her voice stayed even. Strength isn't something you're born with, Captain. It's something that's left when everything else is gone. The words hung between them, heavy, honest, uncomfortably true. Rastova swallowed, then straightened. Get some rest, Chief. Sharma nodded. Aye, ma'am. The captain turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the metallic rhythm of the deck. Sharma stayed. The wind was cool now, salt cutting through the night air. Below, the reflection of the ship's lights shimmered on the water. Her hand moved to the tag over her heart. She brushed her thumb across the rough edges, feeling the pits of corrosion, the uneven texture. Rust imperfect, honest. Every scratch on it had a memory, every stain a story she'd never tell. The sea whispered against the hull, steady and constant. She whispered back, "Still here." At dawn, the crew would wake to find the ship spotless, tools cleaned, reports filed, and every valve checked by hand. No one would know who'd done it. And by midday, Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma would be gone, reassigned quietly to another vessel, another name on another roster. She preferred it that way, because heroes belonged in headlines. But dignity worked in silence. On the pier, long after sunrise, Captain Rostova would find a small canvas pouch left on her desk. Inside, a folded note written in careful block letters. "Captain, the ship doesn't need me anymore. That means she's ready. Trust her and she'll take care of you. A.S." Pinned beside the note was a small strip of metal, faded, rusted, the name barely visible. Sharma. Rostova held it for a long moment, then closed her hand around it like something sacred. Outside, the Vigilance rested at dock, calm and still. But if you listened closely enough, you could still hear her heartbeat, steady, human, alive. The kind of rhythm that never comes from a machine. The USS Greyhound was half the size of the Vigilance, twice as loud, and infinitely younger. The steel felt newer, cleaner, less burdened by history. The air smelled of new paint and ambition. You could almost taste the inexperience in it, like metal still learning how to breathe. When Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma stepped aboard, no one knew who she was. No one noticed the faint rust stains on the name tag pinned over her chest. No one recognized the calloused hands, the gray-streaked hair, or the way she scanned every corridor with quiet precision, not looking for power, but for flaws. To them, she was just another transfer, another aging tech chief sent to babysit a ship full of overconfident officers. And that suited her just fine. Her quarters were small, a single bunk, a locker, a small desk. She unpacked in silence, a few tools, a worn sextant, and an empty mug. From the pocket of her duffel, she pulled out the folded piece of cloth that once held her name tag. She didn't put it on the desk this time. She tucked it inside her uniform pocket. Not because she was ashamed, because it wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about being useful. Her first morning aboard began before dawn. By the time the crew stumbled into the mess for coffee, Sharma had already checked the generator room, the backup grid, and the emergency compressors twice. When the engineering officer, Lieutenant Halpern, finally arrived, he found her standing near the diagnostic panel with a wrench in hand. "Excuse me," he said, irritation already bleeding into his tone. "Who authorized you to open those systems?" Sharma looked up from the console, her expression neutral. "No one." Halpern frowned. "Then maybe wait for orders before you start tearing apart my engine room." "It's your engine room," Sharma said evenly, "but it's everyone's funeral if the cooling manifold fails mid-run." Halpern blinked. "That's not going to happen. The systems are new, tested." Sharma turned a dial slightly and the pressure gauge dropped 2 points. "And leaking," she said. "Now it's fixed." She handed him the wrench and walked past him without another word. He stared after her, jaw tight, the faint echo of authority cracking in his chest. By midday, the whispers had begun. "She's a ghost, man, never raises her voice." Caught her recalibrating the nav sensors before shift. Who does that? She was in the engine room at 400, again. In a ship full of youth and noise, she was silent, steady, unshakable, unknowable. When she wasn't working, she was teaching, not formally, not by rank but by habit. A misaligned fuse here, a nervous ensign there. She had a way of turning chaos into calm without ever explaining how. Her students learned fast, mostly because they wanted to understand what she understood, how to make things work when everything fails. It was never about orders. It was about instinct. The only one who didn't like her was Lieutenant Halpern. He was brilliant, top of his class, confident, sharp. The kind of officer who quoted manuals and believed systems never lied. He didn't understand her, the way she seemed to see things before they happened. To him, she was a relic. Until the day the storm came. It rolled in fast, a violent front of wind and steel-gray clouds that swallowed the horizon within minutes. The Greyhound was on patrol, 60 miles off the coast, when the radar began to fail. Halpern stood on the bridge, staring at the flickering displays. "Reboot the array," he shouted. The comm tech tried. The screen blinked once, then went dark. Rostova would have known what to do, Sharma thought distantly, but Rostova wasn't here. She was. She arrived on the bridge quietly, rainwater dripping from her jacket. "What's offline?" Halpern didn't even look at her. "Everything, we're blind, sitrep, under control." Sharma walked past him to the analog compass bolted near the helm. The needle spun violently before settling southwest. "It's not under control," she said softly. Halpern turned sharply. "Chief, I didn't ask for your—" Lightning flashed across the water, a white scar splitting the sky. The ship lurched as a wave hit broadside, slamming the crew against the railings. "Ballast systems are compensating," Halpern barked. "Stabilizers online." Sharma glanced at the analog indicators, and her stomach dropped. "They're not online," she said. "They're stuck in autoloop." Before he could argue, the ship rolled again, harder. This time, the floor tilted enough that coffee mugs shattered across the deck. Halpern lunged for the console, typing commands frantically. "Override engaged." Sharma grabbed his arm. "Manual control, Lieutenant, now." He yanked away. "We don't have time to." She hit the emergency release lever. Sparks flew as the console snapped into manual mode. The sound of gears grinding echoed through the ship. Then, stillness. The ship steadied. Halpern stared at her, chest heaving. "How did you know?" Sharma wiped the rain from her brow. "Because machines panic faster than people." He said nothing, just looked at her, the realization sinking in like seawater through steel. They rode out the storm for 4 hours. When it finally passed, the sea stretched flat again, calm, silver, endless. The crew worked in silence, checking systems, patching lines. And for the first time since she'd come aboard, Lieutenant Halpern came to her, no swagger, no ego, just quiet respect. "I should have listened sooner," he said. "You did," Sharma replied, "just later than you'd like." He hesitated, then asked, "How'd you learn all that?" She looked out over the water. Time, failure, listening. He nodded slowly, waiting for more. But she didn't give more. She never did. That night, the storm's aftermath hung in the air, salt and silence. The crew moved softer now, slower, as if aware that the ship they'd trusted wasn't invincible. In the mess hall, conversation hummed quietly. Someone was telling a story about her, something about her once fixing a reactor blindfolded, or being part of some ghost unit from a decade ago. Halpern sat nearby, half listening. When he finally looked up, Sharma was there, standing at the doorway, tray in hand. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Chief." She sat down, expression calm, eyes tired. "I told the captain about the ballast fix," he said. "You'll get commendation for that." Sharma shook her head. "Don't." He frowned. "Why not?" She sipped her coffee before answering. "Because if they remember the chief, they forget the crew, and that's not the lesson." Halpern stared at her for a moment, trying to find logic in the words. Before realizing it wasn't logic she spoke in, it was experience. "You ever get tired of being invisible?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Visibility's a distraction. You start watching yourself instead of the horizon." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll learn that someday." She met his eyes. "Maybe you already have." Later, when most of the crew had turned in, Halpern went to the lower deck. The ship's logs were still updating. He scrolled through the system records, curious about her, about where she'd come from. He searched her personnel file. Most of it was blank. Just a single line under commendations. Operation Cinderfall, service classified. He stared at it for a long time, then closed the file. He didn't ask her about it again. Days passed. The Greyhound returned to normal operations, but something had changed. The crew moved differently now, more deliberate, more aware. The bridge ran smoother. The reports came earlier. Even the youngest recruits started picking up her habits, the calm pauses, the quiet thinking before reacting. Sharma noticed, but she never said anything. She just kept working, letting the rhythm of purpose fill the empty spaces inside her. Sometimes in the quiet before dawn, she'd stand by the railing and watch the horizon, the soft line where sea met sky. Somewhere out there, the Vigilance was still sailing. She wondered if Captain Rastova still had her name tag. She hoped she did. One evening, Halpern joined her on deck. The sun was setting, that perfect moment where the sky burns gold before surrendering to blue. He leaned against the rail beside her. "You ever think about stopping?" She turned slightly. "Stopping what?" "Serving, moving, fixing everything that breaks." She smiled faintly. "If I stopped, I wouldn't know what to do with my hands." He chuckled softly. "You know, I used to think experience made people harder, but you," he paused, searching for the right word, "you seem quieter, not colder." "Hardness breaks," she said. "Quiet bends." He nodded, looking out over the sea. "The captain says the next fleet reviews naming a new class of destroyers. You think they'll name one after you?" She shook her head. "No one names ships after the ones who hold them together. They name them after the ones who break them gloriously." Halpern smiled. "You don't believe in glory, do you?" "I believe in work," she said simply. "The rest is noise." The sea wind caught her hair. The light of sunset glinting off the faint rust stain near her chest pocket, the ghost of her name tag. Halpern saw it but didn't ask. He knew better now. Some stories weren't meant to be told. They were meant to be lived quietly, again and again, until someone else learned from the silence. And in that silence, in the hum of engines and the slow roll of waves, Chief Anna Sharma found something close to peace. Not the kind you earn. The kind you become. The ocean was calm that morning. The kind of calm that came after storms, the kind that felt earned. The USS Greyhound glided over silver water, sunlight shimmering against her hull. The air was still, the crew quiet, as if the sea itself had decided to pause and listen. Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma stood alone on the aft deck, hands clasped behind her back. The breeze tugged at her sleeves, the faint smell of salt and diesel filling the air. She'd been at sea for 32 years, and for the first time she could feel the weight of every one of them. Her hands, once quick, steady, trembled slightly now, not from fear but from time. You could fight a storm, outthink a system, outlast a ship, but not time. The day began like any other. Systems check, crew rotation, maintenance logs. She moved through her routine with the same calm efficiency she always had. But something was different. The noise of the ship felt softer today, like the sound of a place saying goodbye. As she passed through the engine room, the younger sailors straightened automatically, offering small nods of respect. They didn't even have to say her name. Just a glance was enough. Halpern met her at the far end of the compartment, holding a clipboard. "Morning, Chief. I was about to send someone looking for you." She gave a half-smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." He chuckled, but the sound was subdued. "Got word from Fleet Command. We're rotating personnel next week. You're on the list." She paused. "Transfer." He shook his head. "Retirement." The word hung in the air like a depth charge. Sharma's expression didn't change. "Not my choice." Automatic, ma'am, service cap. She nodded slowly. Ah, the clock wins after all. Halpern hesitated. If it were up to me, you stay. None of this works without you. She looked around, the pipes, the panels, the young hands steadying wrenches under flickering lights. It will, she said softly, because you'll make it work. He swallowed. Chief, I don't, she interrupted gently. I've had enough goodbyes to last a lifetime. That evening, she sat in her quarters for the last time. Her few belongings fit neatly into a single duffel. The sextant, the worn mug, a faded photograph of a crew she once belonged to, faces mostly gone now. And from the small side pocket, she pulled out the rusted tag. The letters were barely visible now, corroded by years of salt and sweat. Sharma. She held it for a long while, tracing the grooves with her thumb. The texture was rough, uneven, real. This little piece of metal had seen more truth than any metal ever could. She placed it carefully on the desk, next to a folded scrap of paper. On it she wrote just 4 words. Keep her steady, always. Then she turned off the light. At dawn, the Greyhound reached harbor. The sky was pale, the water glass still. Seagulls drifted overhead, their cries echoing across the quiet decks. Most of the crew was still asleep when the announcement came. All hands, prepare for personnel departure. Sharma stood on deck, duffel over her shoulder, uniform crisp. She looked up at the bridge one last time, at the young faces pressed to the glass, watching her leave. Halpern appeared beside her. He'd come to see her off. You sure about this? He asked quietly. She smiled faintly. It's not my choice anymore, just my turn. He nodded, trying to keep his composure. You've changed this ship, Chief, changed me. She turned toward him, eyes steady. Don't let that change fade when I'm gone. Quiet doesn't mean invisible. It means you're doing it right. He nodded again. Aye, ma'am. As she reached the gangway, he called out, Chief. She stopped, half turning. He hesitated, then said, You left something in your quarters, a name tag. Her lips curved slightly. No, Lieutenant, I left it where it belongs. And with that she descended the gangway, slow, deliberate, like a tide pulling back to sea. Months passed. The Greyhound sailed new waters, the crew changed, the world moved on. But her presence lingered in habits, in echoes, in small details no one could quite explain. A perfectly balanced gauge no one touched, a note scrawled in the corner of a logbook, checked twice, trust once. A faint streak of rust near the engineering console that no one cleaned out of superstition, or maybe reverence. They called it the Chief's mark. Whenever systems failed or storms came, someone always muttered the same words, do it Sharma's way. And somehow things worked. 1 year later, the Vigilance returned to port, newly refitted, gleaming with polished steel and updated systems. Captain Eva Rostova stepped off the gangway, eyes scanning the harbor. She hadn't been back here since that night. Admiral Tanaka was waiting for her, older now, slower, but still with that same quiet authority. They exchanged salutes. She's beautiful, he said, looking at the ship. She's alive, Rostova replied. That's what matters. Tanaka nodded, then handed her a sealed folder. Thought you'd want to see this. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed the deck of the Greyhound, a small ceremony, a plaque being unveiled. Rostova's breath caught. The plaque read, Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma. For service beyond recognition. For keeping the line when all else failed. Her silence taught us strength. Tanaka said softly, they put it in the engine room, where she'd have wanted it. Rostova smiled faintly. She'd hate the attention. Then it's perfect, Tanaka said. They stood there for a long moment, the sea wind moving gently between them. That night the Vigilance sailed again, quiet, graceful, reborn. As she moved into open waters, the crew began their shift rotations. New faces, new uniforms, same ocean. In the control room, a young sailor tapped the brass gauge near the port wall, the same kind Sharma once calibrated by hand. It hummed back to life. "Good as new," he said. His supervisor, an older engineer who'd once served under Sharma, just smiled. "Not new," he said. "Good as her." Far out at sea, beyond the horizon, an old fishing boat drifted under fading light. A solitary woman sat at the stern, hands steady on the wheel, gray hair tied back beneath a worn cap. The water around her glowed gold with sunset. She wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. But her eyes, those gray, unshakable eyes, still held the horizon the same way. She adjusted her course slightly, checking the line of light against the sextant resting beside her. Still steady, always steady. She smiled small, private content. No medals, no rank, no noise. Just purpose. And as the sun sank beneath the edge of the world, the faint sound of engines carried over the water, distant, familiar, like a heartbeat that never really stops. Years later, the fleet would still tell the story. They'd talk about the ship that survived without its machines, about the crew who relearned how to trust their hands, about the woman with the rusted name tag, the one the Admiral saluted without a word. No one could quite agree on the details. Some said she was a ghost. Some said she'd retired to a cabin by the sea. Some said she was still out there, sailing small boats through big storms, waiting for the next vessel that needed saving. But everyone agreed on one thing. Whenever the sea turned against them, whenever systems failed and fear crept in, someone always whispered the same words over the comm. "Do it Sharma's way." And somehow that always seemed to work. Out there beneath the endless sky, the ocean moved as it always had, calm, brutal, beautiful. And somewhere on its surface, unseen and uncelebrated, a quiet hand still held the line. Because not all legacies roar. Some hum softly, like engines built from faith. Some shine not in gold but in rust. And some people, the rare ones, never need to be remembered. Because the things they built never forget them. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.